If you feel like your body is betraying you, if the pain that you're in, the symptoms that you're in are destroying you, making you feel exhausted and frustrated, and you're at that point of despair, I promise you, you're not broken, you're not stuck, and you are worthy of healing, whether you believe it or not. All that's going on is that there is a loop that we have to get in and break that is keeping and perpetuating these symptoms. So what I want to do in this video is take you through how this loop works, how you can step in and stop it in order to reduce your symptoms, start bringing your energy back and get you to feeling more like yourself. So this video is going to be for you if you're someone right now who is battling with a chronic illness or chronic pain, and you're at the point where you have tried so many different treatments. You've probably been down the practical route, whether it's the doctors and the healthcare system and seeing the specialists and getting a diagnosis and maybe a prognosis. Maybe you've been on medication as well that you really don't like and it makes you feel awful and you'd like to get off that too. And you're at this point where you've tried different healing modalities, right? You're open to the mind-body connection and releasing perhaps it's the chronic stress or the trauma or whatever it is. You've done different healing modalities and meditations and all this stuff, but nothing's really working. And you have got to the point where you're in this loop of just your symptoms flare up. You experience the symptoms, you feel frustrated that they're still there. You end up looking for a solution. You go on YouTube, whether it's then reading books or trying to sign up to courses or working with coaches or Googling local energy healers. And no matter what you do, it feels like you're not really getting anywhere and that life is rapidly passing you by. You're stuck in your body, you're frustrated. So what's going on? I know this situation, okay? This was me from late 2018, really from 2019 when it got really bad, struggling with a chronic condition called post-concussion syndrome, up until around 2025 when I truly felt like I was moving beyond it, okay? And what I'm gonna talk about isn't about rapid healing overnight within, 24 hours, completely transform. I'm talking about getting to the root cause and looking at what is keeping this going, okay? Because I didn't do this for a long period of time and it took me forever until I had to take a look at my life and go, hang on, I'm looking at this the wrong way. Because all the different treatments I spent loads of money on, whether it was a optometrist, whether it was a neurologist, whether it was a vestibular therapist, all these different treatments that I got didn't work, right? And I kept looking at the treatment that I was doing, and everyone that failed just reinforced that either people were trying to rip me off or they didn't know what they were doing, they didn't understand me. And every time I do another form of treatment, I felt a bit more skeptical, right? And less likely to do another one. So I do my own research and I was never ever taking any action. And as I said, I started to age more quickly. The symptoms continued. It massively sort of bled into all aspects of my life. And things only changed when I thought, okay, I need to decide now to do something different. And there was a particular day, which I have mentioned in my other videos, where I was in a complete level of despair, right? Hopelessness. When you try and do so many different things and nothing changes and you're still exhausted, you are still so depressed, right? But also feeling a sense of this like anxiety as well. And you're dealing with the symptoms that you've got, whether it's the dizziness, whether it's nausea, whether it is actually vomiting, or if it's irritation on your skin, whatever it is. We get to the point sometimes in our lives where we are like, I'm done. I can't do this. And things only changed for me where there was one particular day where I went and sat on my armchair and I called out to God. I was like, I don't know, and I'm not a religious person by any stretch, right? Believe in God, but I'm not one of those people that has any form of religious background in my life. But I was so desperate. I was like, I just need help. I really need your help. And in that moment, I kind of felt this voice that was just like, look, just sit and be quiet. Stop trying to solve your situation and think yourself out of this process. Just sit and sit with it. So I sat in silence. And then after a few moments, I had an urge, and we typically use computers and phones. I had an urge to grab a piece of paper and a pen. So I got my journal and I just thought, okay, I'm going to write out everything that's in my head. And I wrote out every single thing that was in my head and was pretty blown away by how the majority of my thoughts were so destructive. So I wrote them out and then I started to feel, right, what each one of those thoughts when I read it made me feel. And there was so much emotion that was linked to feeling frustrated, right? Feeling hopeless, feeling worried, particularly about my future. So in this process of writing them down and then actually sitting with them, I noticed how this emotion sort of, reading them made me feel. And I had this, I suppose, like an aha moment of, God, if they are in my head, right, if those thoughts are ruminating in my head all the time, and those are the emotions behind them that I'm just feeling subconsciously all day, how can I ever heal? Right? And this is the point where I thought, okay, this has got to change. This is a deeper thing. This is not about the treatment. This is not about seeing the right practitioner or the right therapist or what modality I do. This is about something internal. I am perpetuating my problems. And this is where the loop comes in. Okay, now see if you can relate to this. You were going about your life before you had your chronic illness, right? And whatever led up to the point of you having it, there is a massive amount of research showing that chronic stress and traumatic experiences throughout our lives that we pick up over time put us in this state of survival, right? And chronic stress, that state of survival, drives up inflammation, and eventually we see it as symptoms in our body, right? And also mentally too. So we have the physical and the mental symptoms, and you can relate to your symptoms. Now, when we first see these symptoms, we react to them, okay? There's a sense of worry, like, what is this? Why am I feeling dizzy? Why do I keep having headaches? What's going on? And then what will happen is, with that thought, there is that emotion, okay? Every time we think, what is this on my arm? Like, why am I dizzy, right? Why do I feel so sick? Why am I so tired? You notice that there's an emotion behind it. It's not just the thought, it's the emotional aspect. So when you're dealing with being symptomatic, this is where the problem lies, is that we create a loop, right? And there was a linear sort of state of stress up until the point we developed a chronic illness, right? Whether it's from our environment, whether it's from anything external, or whether it was from traumatic experiences that we experienced, whether it's from chronic stress at work or some a grieving time in our lives that we went through that was super stressful. It doesn't matter. What matters is we got to this point and then we started to experience our symptoms. And this is where the problem lies, is that because if you are struggling with a chronic illness or pain or a condition that's chronic, you are constantly getting feedback about your symptoms, right? Because you're experiencing them. So if I'm going about my day and I'm struggling with a chronic illness, and perhaps one of my symptoms is extreme dizziness, every time I feel dizzy, I'm going to have an emotional reaction to it. If I'm not conscious enough to step in and actually manage that, I'm going to have an emotional reaction. And typically, when we have our symptoms, the reactions that we have would be related to worry, right? Or frustration, or hopelessness. And what happens is we keep having these emotional reactions, especially in the early stages when we're not used to this, and we keep having them. And every time we have these life-destroying emotional reactions, we're pushing our body back into that fight or flight response, right? We're going back into survival. And in order to heal, our body cannot be in survival. Okay, so you've seen the connection here. I experience my symptoms, I have an emotional reaction. I either feel worry, I feel anger, frustration, hopeless. Any form of that emotion, or guilty could be another one, because our symptom has stopped us doing a thing, whether it was meeting up with our friends or taking one of our kids out for the day, like whatever it is, there's an emotional response. So every time we have those emotional responses that are not positive or elevated emotions that are life supporting, we're putting ourselves back in a state of chronic stress. Okay, so we're making things worse. So it doesn't matter, and I experienced this, it doesn't matter in a lot of cases the treatment that we get or the specialist that we go and see. Because if we have any form, I used to go and see people for treatment, and a lot of the treatments, to be fair, were actually, I would feel some sort of difference, but nothing major, right? I never felt like I was permanently healed after every one of the treatments I went for. And a lot of these people were good people. But the problem is that as soon as I went about my life, because I didn't feel like this, the version of me before the symptoms, if there was any sort of symptom that would show itself, if I felt a bit dizzy, or if I suddenly felt like I had a migraine coming on, right? Or I felt like I was nauseous, I would instantly have a reaction like, oh no, not again, they're still there, right? This is still going on. So I then feel the symptoms, I'd have that emotional reaction to it, and I'd be angry. And that anger is just putting me straight back into survival and putting my body under more stress, driving more inflammation, which is just going to aggravate the symptoms. And then in that state of frustration and anger and exhaustion, I would be desperately trying to find another solution. So I'd go on YouTube, do as much research as I could around what was going on. I'd read books, I'd listen to audiobooks, I'd search for local healers. I'd ask people and find out if there was any community groups with people they knew that had helped them heal. But I was missing the bigger picture, which you might be able to see now, right? So every time we experience a symptom like this, we are just, if we react to it with that same emotional reaction, we're putting the body in stress because it's a fear-based emotion. Fear-based emotions are putting us into fight or flight, which is one branch of your autonomic nervous system, which is designed to be used only in short periods. We don't want to use this system all the time because it's like driving around all day in your car with your foot on the gas pedal all day. No brakes, not letting the car cool down. What would happen to the car? And that's what happens to our body, right? And then in the same way that the car would gradually begin to break down, that's what happens to us. We try and push the car even more. We can't do that. We have to take our body out of survival and into what's called rest and digest. But if we keep having these emotional reactions, we make things worse. And it's not your fault, right? No one ever taught us, I know I can only speak from my experience of how to deal with these, how to deal with how we react to things like symptoms, right? And deal with chronic stress. So if you're in that boat, do not worry, because when this happens for long enough, if you've been struggling for a long enough period of time, what you'll notice is you start to think there's something wrong with you. And if you are fairly open-minded, as you probably are, if you're watching my content and you've been looking into the work about the mind-body connection and people healing themselves through meditation and changing their beliefs and how they feel, if it doesn't work, you then start to think there's like this reluctance to accept, but it's there, right? It's in your periphery where you think, I might just have to accept this. But there's that burning desire in your soul that I do not want to accept this. So this is where we're at. And if you go through that loop long enough, what happens is you get to the point of complete despair. You don't trust any practitioners. You don't trust anything anyone says in YouTube videos. You still have hope, but you're super skeptical. And if you have any more symptoms, you emotionally react to it. So this is where we've got to change things, right? This is the refresh loop, which you've got to actively step in. This is what I taught myself to do and that you have to do in order to break this cycle. I'm not telling you you're going to heal yourself within 24 hours, but you are going to give yourself some mental and physical and emotional space. Take the pressure off your body and get it back into a state of where it can actually recharge. Okay, so I'm giving a vague overview here, and I will talk about this in more depth in other videos, but it's really important that you understand what I'm talking about and how this is going to work in your day to day. Because I know that's probably what you're thinking. It's like, look, I know about all these treatments, but what do I do during my day? Here's the thing. Let's say you're going about your day and one of your symptoms flares up, right? And as a result, you notice it. In that moment, I want you to notice where you feel in your body you are reacting. Okay, so notice the reaction, notice the anger or the frustration. And if you've never done this before, it'll take a bit of time, but it's absolutely critical that you do this. Notice where you feel it in your body, the reaction. And typically it's either in the throat, the chest, the solar plexus, or the gut. Could be in the forehead too, or the neck, like around the shoulders. And just notice it. Just notice it and go, oh, okay, yeah, I can feel that. And you'll feel like a sensation. It could be light to begin with. If you're not in touch with yourself on a somatic level, that's normal. I was the same when I first started doing this. But you'll become more body aware, right? And the emotional reaction will come from your body. And just notice where you feel it. And in that moment, just place your attention on it. As in focus and feel it and go, okay, I can feel that. Yeah, that's in my chest. And what I want you to do is simply breathe in through your nose as you keep your attention on where you feel it. And just hold your breath with it. Keep your attention on where you feel the tension and hold your breath with it. And then let go. And let that area relax, right? And it won't dissolve it necessarily straight away, but you'll give yourself a bit of breathing space. And if you're in a part of the world where you can take a bit of time, you can keep doing it until you feel like it's completely dissolved. Might take a few hours, might take a few days, could take 5 seconds, depending on how strong this reaction is that's been embedded into you, all right? So that is the first part. And this will give you just a tiny bit of like light. You think, okay, I can do this, right? There is some room here for me to actually heal. Massively important. Now, the next step, which I won't talk about too much in this video, but it's super important, is learning how to then replace those old emotional states with elevated emotions that actually support you. Okay, and get your body to then heal, so that the default reactions and emotions that you're feeling are ones that keep your body in a state of balance and help you start healing. Okay, I really hope that video was helpful, but that is what's going on. Okay, you've got to break this loop. I know this will now make sense if you've watched this to this point. That's what you've got to do. I really hope this was helpful. Take care.